I'd like to welcome all of you to the Our Revolution Helena TV program. My name is Frank Kromkowski. I'm one of the members of Our Revolution Helena. Our group was founded in May of 2015 as Helena for Bernie Sanders, and we've been meeting at least once or twice a week since then, now every 2 weeks at Plymouth Church. And we started this TV program, and we've been looking at issues that have been concerned to us. Wealth inequality, dark money in Montana politics, healthcare crisis, gun control, the need for people to be more involved in things like voter registration and other issues. And we've also talked about Donald Trump and his presidency. Our guest today is a friend of ours, Paul Edwards from Helena, who's a filmmaker and writer who has been studying lots of issues very, very deeply for years. Paul writes a lot for the Information Clearinghouse, the Smirking Chimp, and Counterpunch, all alternative media, as alternatives to the mainstream media in which a lot of us feel that you could spend your whole life digging into it, come up with nothing. And so Paul has been studying and writing a series of articles, and I encourage you to look at them in Counterpunch especially, a series of articles that he's written. A lot of us in Our Revolution Helena, as well as people in Helena, have been really distressed and deeply troubled by the events of the last couple of years, and more than that. And I've asked Paul to come to talk with us about what his view is of what those real issues are. Why are they so deeply troubling to us? Why are people so baffled? And if there are any solutions to get out of this mess, what might they be? So I want to welcome you, Paul, and have your thoughts about those issues.
Well, thank you, Frank. It's nice to be here with you. We go way back. Frank and I worked together, oh God, I don't know how many years ago on the reform of the Patriot Act, or the effort to reform it when that came out. We took it to the legislature and eventually got the legislature signed on to a resolution, although it wasn't a law, a resolution that seriously examined the Patriot Act and its effect and influence on politics in this country, and opposed it pretty openly. And the Helena City Council actually endorsed it, and we finally put it into a resolution at the legislature that eventually our governor signed on to. And it didn't do any good, of course, but it was a valiant effort. And it's the reason I bring it up is that it, in addition to our connection, it speaks to the idea that this was 12 whatever years ago that we did that. It puts in perspective the fact that this Trump business and this current circumstance in which we find ourselves is nothing new. Trump is not an aberration in the American political system. He's a continuation and a result. And by that I mean, the same things that were very troubling before he was ever even thought of. The increasing repression of the national security state, the inequity that has been institutionalized in America and which has eviscerated or at least hollowed out the middle class. These issues didn't begin with Trump, and they won't end with Trump. These things go back to the defects in the system that we have nourished for many, many years. So yes, it's a good thing to take a hard look at Trump and his policies and his persona, what he does, and that so much of it is so distressing and so destructive and so potentially dangerous. But I think, from my take on it is that this is not something that arrived in town with that particular snake oil merchant. This is something that has been part of and parcel of American politics and policy for, I'd have to say, generations. We can get into considerable detail about Trump just in terms of what's actual today, but I think it's important for people to understand the run-up. And the run-up is that that we have been preparing the ground for this kind of leadership, as you call it, or as someone calls it, for decades, really, in our politics.
And there seem to be still a lot of people who say that Trump is a great president. I remember getting messages from Deborah Lamb, the head of the Montana Republican Party, talking about how great it was to have Trump up in Great Falls, and we have Democrats who are saying we've got to do everything to get Democrats in. But I gather your view is that some of these Republican answers or thoughts and Democratic thoughts are simply inadequate to the issues that are really troubling us as a people.
Yeah, I don't think that anything, I mean, I think that the level of our political dialogue about not only about Trump, but about everything across the board, including the financial inequity, including the disastrous healthcare snafu, which is by no means even addressed, let alone handled. The imperial thrust of America putting $700 billion into the part of the military budget that you actually see, which is probably $1 trillion in actuality, with that which is concealed and hidden. The effort to impose a kind of American dominion on the world. All of this is a part of the difficulty that is the matrix for Trump and his administration, his operation. He represents the triumph of a kind of inarticulate rage with our political system that comes from the fact that the poor and even the middle classes have been treated with such indifference by the political system, have been suckered in effect by being drawn in to a mentality in which the voting for the lesser of two evils over the last 50 years has led us into a position where neither the Republican nor the Democratic Party actually represent anything responsible and useful for the American electorate. So a lot of the electorate, particularly those disadvantaged, but remember, Trump didn't win just with the disaffected hillbilly vote, the deplorables, as Hillary called them. Trump won a majority of white women in America in the vote. Yes, Trump lost the popular vote count by 3 million votes. If you make an analysis of how that worked out, you will find that the 3 million votes were entirely in California. Trump lost California by 3 million votes. Apart from that, across the board, he was virtually neck and neck with Hillary. And at the Electoral College, of course, he won by a matter of several thousand votes in several states. Probably half a dozen states put him over where he had less than 100,000 votes in excess of what Hillary had. But the point is, the fact that he lost the popular vote by 3 million votes does not tell you the story unless you know which 3 million votes those were. So I think the disaffection of America is so tremendous, and that includes not only the underprivileged and the unemployed and the sick and the poor and those who are uneducated or ignorant. It includes a lot of people who are disaffected because they've been told over and over again that if you just vote for us, why, things will improve. We'll do this, that, and the other thing in order to make life better for you. And then it doesn't happen. I mean, to me, and this is not a particularly popular stance, but to me, Obama was one of the most disappointing presidents in the history of this country. And the reason I say that is that he came in on a wave of such promise, of such hope for change, and people bought it in a big way. I mean, the electorate was moved by it enormously, and they voted for him, and they gave their loyalty to this man, who then did in 8 years for the average American virtually nothing. What he did was to continue the imperial war policy of Bush Jr., who is, Trump notwithstanding, probably the dumbest president we've ever had and may ever have. What Obama did was to continue the policies of Bush in terms of the imperial murder machine around the world. You know, there was Obama was there to create Syria. Obama was there so that Assad must go. I mean, he was committed to all kinds of the very same imperial violent thrust that Bush had initiated.
Now that view, of course, seems to be something that most Americans cannot stomach.
Mm-hmm.
But just recently I came across a book by David Garrow, which is a biography of Obama and an analysis of his administration. And he says in the last chapter there that Obama was a hollow man, that there was really no substance to him. And so when people mention that kind of thing about Obama, as you are here, a lot of people say, you know, it can't be that bad. Obama was great.
Not only that, but they feel a love for him, and the reason they feel a love for him is I think, not complex. The fact is he's a handsome man. He is an intelligent man. He's a man who speaks well. He speaks congenially and collegially. He's kind in his speech. He is gentle. He's appealing. He can laugh and smile and convince you of what it is that what he says. The problem is there was never any real, genuine follow-through about anything. He took no stand effectively on the medical crisis in the country. He let it go under his administration with the help of our idiot senator, Mr. Baucus, who refused to even consider a public option, let alone Medicare for all, which of course is the only real solution. I mean, it's the only humane solution to the healthcare crisis. Obama made a wonderful speech in Cairo to the people of Islam, to the Muslim people of all the Middle East, telling them how this is going to be a new day. We're turning over a new leaf here. We're going to be congenial. We're going to be cooperative with you. We're going to respect you for what you are. And where's the beef? I mean, all that he ever did was to make brutal war on Islamic countries all through the Near East, to continue the Bush war in Afghanistan, to continue the war in Iraq, to continue the illusory buildup of the light at the end of the tunnel school of lunacy about we'll surge again and then Iraq will be fine. He dealt on no effective level with these countries, nor did he temper the brutality of America in the world. I mean, this is all about, basically, it's all about hegemony for America.
Well, this is a very dark view of the situation, Paul. And it reminds me of a poem I read years ago by Theodore Roethke. And he said, "In a dark time, the eye begins to see." And he went on in that poem to say that there is a depth, inner resource that we have that cannot be crushed. And if we only found what that was, then we could build our way out of this dark time. And I would think that this is a dark time in your view and mine. But is there a way to dig our way out of this situation of having maybe a good president like Obama in so many ways, but who failed to address poverty, health care for millions and millions and millions? And now you have person in Donald Trump who is rightly called a bloviating ignoramus by George Will, a conservative, and by David Frum, another very conservative intellectual, saying, you know, here is a person whose middle name is me, and nothing else matters to him except me. He's a narcissist. He does not study. He does not even read. And he doesn't even read the prompter when he gets the prompter, because he goes off script all the time. He's a sexist jerk, as they say in the normal street
all
language.
All of that.
But is there a way out? Is there something in this dark time that we can see and that we can move towards and put our energies into and find the courage to do?
I wish I thought so, Frank. I really do. I don't have the views that I have because I am a fundamentally pessimistic or bitter nature. I wish I thought that there was some kind of thrust that would lead in a positive direction. But I think, unfortunately, that the capitalist system as it is currently run is based on the extraction from the world of its resources for the enrichment of a tiny, tiny sliver of the power elite, the exceedingly wealthy at the top. I don't see it making any concessions in that general, and I'm not talking now just about America. I'm talking about, this includes Europe, this includes China. This is a world system now. The countries that call themselves socialist, that call themselves communist, it's a joke. They have abandoned that altogether. Countries in Europe are not socialist by any real measure. China is not communist by any real measure. It's authoritarian, sure. It's a fundamental Politburo dictatorship of its people, but it is not communist. It isn't nothing communal about it. It's raging capitalism. I mean, if you go to Shanghai or Hong Kong nowadays, you could take Manhattan Island and drop it into Shanghai and look for it for a week and never find it. The buildings there go on forever. It's unbelievable. It's staggering. It's like another planet. And this is from capitalism. This is from wild state capitalism. The thing that the American system is stuck in is it's owned entirely by the power, the money elite, and its whole purpose is profit. It has no provision for social good. It no longer is interested in the well-being of the citizenry. That's irrelevant to it. It's interested in its margins, in its gain, and so because it owns the system, politically now I'm talking, the money that they have, the power that they have financially allows them to colonize both parties and to fundamentally, in order to be elected by either party, you need to be vetted by the system that exists within the state. And if you don't pass muster in terms of your loyalty to imperialist capitalism, you don't even, I mean, you may run, but you're irrelevant. The system is owned, the political system is owned by finance, and finance is run on the capitalist model. And so the only way that concessions have ever been rung, and you know this from the Great Depression, the only way that concessions have ever been rung from capitalism is by power in the street, power taken by the people who are so desperate that they're willing to forget about their boats and planes and mortgages and whatever that is that they own, and they don't have any of that anymore, and they're willing to risk everything in order to pressure the system to acknowledge their needs and to do something about it. That's what happened under Roosevelt. It didn't happen under Obama with 2008. Basically, that was a bank revolution. What happened there was that the country was failing because of the casino capitalism. It was at the point where there was meltdown was threatened, so that the government came in and arranged to refinance and refloat, not the people who lost their mortgages, people who lost their homes. It refloated the banks. It refloated AIG. It refloated these gigantic, the very massive institutions that had caused the failure to begin with. So when you have the parties representing this kind of interest and indifferent to the well-being of the people, there's no exit, as Jean-Paul Sartre said. I don't see a way for reform.
Mm-hmm. When you were speaking, I was thinking of my mother, Esther Maranowska-Kromkowski, who was a saint, a Christian saint, as the term we would use, kind, compassionate, teaching us to follow the humble Jesus, who said, "Whatever you do to the least of the brothers and sisters, you do unto me." Saying essentially that we have to, if we want to, like in my tradition, the Christian tradition, if you want to be faithful to that tradition, and if there is a light, to look at that example of Jesus. And his example led to his death at the hands of the Roman Empire. But my mom said, at a time, this was 50 years ago, she said, at a time when people were saying, some leaders in our local community were saying that we need to go and fight communism and fight Russia, because that's the essence of Christianity. And so my mom said, no, we don't believe that. We're Christians. Christ is the head of our house. Do not, and referring to these false leaders that she was reacting to, said, do not follow the parade when the parade's going in the wrong direction. She said, follow Jesus Christ. Now, Christianity has been debased in so many ways, as you would, I think, agree. But that essence of following a vision of one who, in other words, said something of what you said, to listen to the suffering of the people and do everything you can to find a way within your means to address that. No matter what Donald Trump does, no matter what Obama failed to do, no matter what Hillary Clinton, he never even promised to do. So that's my final kind of word as part of our interview here. Our time is up, and I want to thank you, Paul, for being here. I don't expect
that went by quickly, didn't it?
Yes, it did. My views, of course, as a Christian, representing my mom, whose birthday is tomorrow and would be 102 years old were she alive, of course, do not represent our revolution, Helena. They're just my personal views. But I want to thank you, Paul, for being here, for sharing your thoughts, provocative, thoughtful thoughts. And I want to invite all of our viewers to come to our Revolution Helena meetings. Our next one will be August 9th. It'll be at Plymouth Church. And you're all welcome to join us as part of this dialogue to figure out how to get our way out of this horrible mess that we are in at this time. Thank you very much.